Who really aligns with our vision for America? We will each give our view of the flaws in the radical socialist agenda to show why it does not work and what a better approach looks like. Americans do not want communism, despite some wins by the radical Democratic Socialist of America. They consistently underperform the polls even in the elections they win. In a primary, radicals can upset dinosaur politicians whose only accomplishment is that they were elected and nothing else. In a general election, the task is harder when you are asking your fellow residents to support ideas that are counter to their values and detrimental to theirs and everyone they hold dear well-being. So, in today's reality check, let us discuss concepts from these radicals. I'm going to discuss the concept of fair share and why it is a nonsensical argument that is economically inefficient. The objective of any government, the federal, state, or local governments, should be to be effective and efficient in all their programs. That is the goal, which they never seem to meet. But effectiveness and efficacy are crucial to the concept of good government. What is effectiveness and efficacy? Effectiveness is the idea that you are good at the task at hand. If you say you want to provide everyone a car, then to be effective you first need to have a definition of what number of people count as everyone, and when you can reasonably deliver a car to that population. After you know what the objective and metrics are, you then need to deliver the number of cars projected by the date expected. Barring any reasonably unforeseen events, you either meet those goals and deem effective or miss those targets and viewed as less effective. The amount and time missed will determine the level of ineffectiveness. To be efficient, you need to have determined a budget for what purchasing that set number of cars would cost you and not go over that target. If you come under that amount, then you are efficient and have money to return to the coffers or to fund the next drive. If you go over that amount, then you need to ask for the creditors to pay for the difference. The problem generally for governments is that they rarely ever provide the services to the expected number of people, at the expected quality, and the expected cost. This is not unique to the governments in the United States, but governments across the board. Generally they are ineffective and inefficient. Be one but not both. We have come to expect the government to not live up to the promises of either the candidates running for office or the elected officials that spent their entire career doing the same job. We have generally accepted they will not deliver on promises. And we use politics to play up the effort or detract from the ones that actually come close. The general expectation of the public is that the price tag is always going to be higher than what was marketed, and the government will look for a group of suckers to fund their inability to operate projects and process in a manner that is cost-conscious and timely. Rather, the argument is who should be paying the cost created by bad leadership, waste, corruption, and fraud. The idea that people are not paying a fair share is flawed because of what the formula the left uses as fair. If there are 100 slices of pizza, and I eat 8 slices, my fair share is 8% of the bill because I consumed or utilized 8% of the total. I should not be looking for someone who has more money to cover the cost of my 8 slices, especially if they had less or none at all. The most equitable distribution is based on usage. Now, there is a reasonable accommodation to ensure that everyone has the ability to get a slice, especially if the person has no rational way of covering the cost. But the infrastructure needs to be that people who are reasonably able-bodied pay for the cost of their usage. The idea that we should find people who we deem are wealthier than another population to provide for their entire life expenses is fundamentally flawed. While the cost may be a smaller percentage of their income, they are not generating the cost and not receiving the benefit at all. And that matters. How is it fair for people to pay for something they are not using and be responsible for every increase in cost? The wealthy already pay for more than their fair share of the cost of society, and even more when you factor in the amount of money that they donate. We already ask those who have more to contribute more into the government coffer. And we traditionally have at least tried to be somewhat responsible to make that fund cover as much as reasonably possible without constantly asking for more. But the idea that one group of people should create a wish list and ask another group to cover the cost without any complaint, input, or benefit is theft. Plain and simple. People should cover the costs they generate, and cover the cost to insure against costs they may know will exist but not when needed. That is part of being a responsible adult. The fact that people do not want to talk about is when you separate the cost from the benefactor, the cost increases because the cost creator will be unbound by the responsibility of the bill. If I did not pay for my 8 slices, which already is a lot of pizza, why would I not grab a 9th and 10th slice for the road? Because it does not cost me anything more than the prior 8. Consider the student loan market, which is highly backed by the federal government. According to artificial intelligence research, over 60% of borrowers who receive subsidized student loans will max out the amount they can borrow. That number shrinks when you look at borrowers of unsubsidized student loans, which require the borrower to be able to cover the cost of interest from day one of disbursement. In fields where the borrowers are expected to enter high-wage positions, the percentage of maxed-out borrowers is drastically less. Medical, law, and business majors are less likely to max out their loan amounts. An interesting phenomenon, as one may expect people who have a greater known ability to max out their borrowing to do so. Now, I will acknowledge the fact that some students may need to max out their loans. There are many students that have responsibilities beyond the average student, which is understandable. Some are the results of their choices or choices made by others that fall onto them. But we cannot pretend like that is every student's case. For every 1 or 2 students that unfortunately find themselves in this situation, there are 4 or 5 students who max out their loans because they want to eat out every night, go on spring break every year, and live comfortably. Not judging them. I knew a ton of people who did that. Some regretted it. Others simply understood the need to maximize their income with second jobs to pay down their student loans. I cannot reasonably support the idea that public policy would allow one group to create a bill that another group has to cover and expect that is fair. We know how that idiocracy plays out. Eventually the bill becomes too large to manage and no longer the wealthy class available to pillage. Then comes the rationing. You will get a situation where there are more college-qualified students by far than available spots for them. A reality for most of the world, which is why America is a major attraction for international students. Because their socialist economies are not able or willing to actually provide a seat for every student. It took a free market economy that created excess seats to cover for their socialist neighbors. A better approach is to focus on creating increased competition, support market disruptions that create innovation, opportunity, and expanded pools of providers. Markets naturally will consolidate as they mature. But, when new products, services, and manners of delivery created outside of those established providers, markets grow and opportunity expands. Instead of seeking suckers, create and grow the population of people able to cover the cost of their living. Create public policy that will encourage creation of products and services that are affordable, effective, and offered efficiency. Create public policy that protects private enterprise and public-private partnerships that cover the populations overlooked.
How about we use free market solutions to create funds that can cover or offset some of the costs that some struggle to pay themselves? Go back to the pizza example. How can we ensure that those 100 slices are spread over more people? Maybe instead of economies of scale, we use economies of help. Maybe if you purchase 2, you pay a price and each additional slice includes cost to encourage the production of the next set of 100 slices. Rather than encouraging gluttony, we right-size portions and help to spur increased production. If someone eats 8 slices of pizza, they should have to pay more besides the indigestion they will deal with later. At least in this closed system. But the surcharge will fuel expanded production. Those who can afford it and desire it will pay for what they actually use. And there may be some excess to cover those who want the normal amount but might have been left out. The focus by the left is to create flawed arguments that fuel sympathy for government ineffectiveness and inefficiencies. So people argue and debate over the minor inconveniences rather than the real problems. Like the flawed Medicare for all, which will not make healthcare more affordable or better quality. There are some people who question why shouldn't wealthier people pay a little more to offset the cost of the poor. First, they already do. In healthcare, the poor already are covered by Medicaid and the elderly are covered by Medicare. Both systems that may do well for people that are geographically restricted, but not programs that you want to push the entire population into. The best approach in any distribution system is to match the cost to the received benefit. Match the person creating the cost and receiving the benefit. The ability to do that will provide the greatest effectiveness and efficiency. People who have to foot the bill for the cost they create tend to manage those costs. When you separate, the benefactor will consume more than reasonable while the payer is forced to pay more than what could you ever rationally consider their fair share. And how successful someone is should not really matter. You are not volunteering to do your fair share of their effort, creativity, and risk acceptance, so why should you demand a share of their income? I agree there are some costs that are forced upon us that are burdensome to us that would be less burdensome to another person. That is why you should purchase insurance, manage your health, and make good decisions that do not lead to higher costs down the line. That should be the goal regardless of wealth or status. How would you like someone to walk into your home and add items to your shopping list for you to cover? Especially when they are not helping with their fair share of the chores, care of anyone in the household, or maintenance of the home. Just because they do not want to work. That is not fair.
Americans are very compassionate and generous. Many of these people that progressives want to steal from are donating to charities, funding the buildings that these progressives study in, and creating the opportunities that we all benefit from. But we should not confuse generosity for naivety. We already ask more from those who have more. But the radical practice of claiming everything is too burdensome is not a sustainable approach to governance and life in general. If you want more in life, then you have to do more. Work smarter and harder. But there is a cost in being dumb, lazy, and entitled. And that should be paid by the person that is that. I agree that people should not go hungry in the richest nation in the world or should not receive health care. But I do not think that we force our society into a health program that is ineffective, destructive, and completely idiotic. People should always have choice and never be limited. The only limit should be on the power of government over us. There is Medicaid and Medicare to cover those truly in need and unable to care for themselves. There are now affordable private plans available on the market. So, I think we need to start rejecting these radical claims that everyone is a victim. There are choices out there, and if you are simply not making them, then that is your choice and live with that. Other people should not receive a bill because another is too lazy and entitled to believe that they have a right to the fruit of another's labor. If we want better, then we need to be better personally. Make better personal choices, more productive actions, and build your own success. Ask the right questions that can help you match success rather than try to plunder it. There are far too many people in college knowingly choosing the wrong major and radically expecting success without any ingenuity, innovation, and work. Some career fields do not have great base salaries. That is because there is a great supply of workers in that space versus the available positions. If you are in a major that is popular, then you need to research the market forecast. Add a second major or minor that is more exclusive. For instance, if you want to become a teacher, that is great, but in some communities, teaching is not a high-paying position. So, you may have to be creative with your approach if the salary does not meet your needs. Maybe you have to subsidize your salary with tutoring, leveraging your expertise in a market of parents wanting to help their child do better. If you are a non-certified accountant doing bookkeeping, maybe do small business bookkeeping on the side as a freelancer. Establish a brand that may help fund that CPA or simply a service that expands to help small businesses that simply cannot afford to hire accountants or pay retainers to an accounting firm. The American dream is never about entitlement and jealousy. It always has been about aspiring to be better tomorrow than you are today. Finding a way forward and making it work. Being innovative, creative, and problem-solving. Yes, the most important skill in life is problem-solving next to communication.
The fair share argument is a distraction from the real problem. The government is both unwilling and unable to operate effectively and efficiently. So, the fair share debate is simply trying to determine who the government will bill to cover their bad governance. We can accept the reality that the government cannot operate as a business. At least in the same exact manner, businesses can pick and choose their customers. Select which markets, market sectors, and industries they are best suited to serve. The government has issues and problems hoisted on them, and they need to address them. That is a reality that we need to acknowledge, but not an excuse that we should accept. The government still has the responsibility to protect resources and limit the cost to the overall society. All these people complaining about the Department of Government Efficiency and defending waste, fraud, corruption, and abuse are crazy. The more dollars that you preserve, the more funds you protect, and the more cost you avoid, all result in the more dollars that you can spend on the causes or needs that you aim to meet. In healthcare, the view of good health systems is that every dollar saved in operations is an additional dollar able to be invested in life-saving equipment, attracting staff, and expanding service capacity. Same in the private sector. The more savings that are generated is another dollar able to be invested in retaining critical staff, expanding operations, and providing customer perks. All essential functions that help the consumer experience. Anyone with half a functioning brain would understand that the health of the overall economy is essential for a well-funded government that is not dependent on constant tax increases. Rather than trying to steal the fruit of other people's labor, let us try to grow the economy, expand business, and create economic activity that will elevate people, communities, and government coffers. The problem with these progressive socialists, also known as communists, is that they are not seeing the obvious flaws, which shows that what they are pushing for is not beneficial, and they have ulterior motives. They never really defend their positions, they simply try to bully the public with identity politics or other ad hominems. The fact of the matter is that communist model of a shared economy proved ineffective, leading to national rationing, population assignment to critical tasks, and even mass executions. Communist nations like China realized that the economic dogma was flawed, which is why it moved to accept some market economics to some degree. They were neighbors to the Soviet Union and did not want that same fate. But they still assign where you can live and work, like Russia. So, they have not completely embraced economic freedom. Rather, they just allowed the West to invest in their economy and utilize their billions of unskilled labor to help fill the void that is created by communism, and gain technology and knowledge without developing. Simply allow companies to operate and then seize the intellectual property, also known as theft. Let us stop arguing about fair share and start talking about quality governance. Why are our government allowing funds to be dispersed to organizations that are not actually legitimate and calling it healthcare? Why do governments overpay and not hold those underbrand workers and vendors accountable? Why does the government allow these nonprofits to bilk taxpayer funds? The beauty of how the federal and many state governments have operated is that they have managed to have the public believe the government is good and effective without it actually being either one. We need to remove the rose-colored glasses. If the government is unable to provide services that it is tasked to do, then it should push those to the private sector. A competitive market is much more suitable than a monopoly, which is something that these commies typically agree with. But they do not understand that the government is a monopoly. The government should help set the expected standards and push for full coverage, highlighting areas of opportunity for entrepreneurs to fill gaps. People are paying their fair share. The government is simply expanding the bill due to incompetence and greed for power and influence. We need to shift the discussion towards what is the fair share of influence the government should have. An easy question. Very little.